Hello, everybody. Welcome to our panel, Pioneering Visions, Contemporary African Artists. I am Phillip Boutte Jr., concept artist and co-founder of 9B Collective, and I'm on the advisory council here at LightBox Expo. Thank you guys for joining us so much. I'm very excited about this panel for multiple reasons, mainly because these are my friends, but also because we've become friends, online, and I'm very happy to have them here. They're all very talented. A lot of their work you guys have seen just around, or even just randomly searching, and you see something cool and you're like, who did that, or who is that? To have them here is a big deal. But I'm going to have them introduce themselves so that we can get better acquainted, so you guys can get to know who they are. Okay, so let's start with Malcolm.
Morning. Thank you for coming to this panel. Myself and Daniel came in from Cape Town on Monday, and we've been very sort of honored to be here at LightBox and be able to talk to you guys. So yeah, I come from Cape Town. I am a Cameroonian born person, moved to SA, and I grew up being an anime nerd at school. And that's quite an interesting thing, especially in an African context, because you kind of, it felt at the time like you had to stick to one specific grouping and to be accepted by your peers. And I think I didn't let that affect me. I kind of really got into drawing, got into animation quite early. I also have African parents, so when I told them that I wanted to draw, they were like, nope, you do architecture. And I did do architecture because there's no arguing with that. But we had a deal, and I kind of told him, my dad, I told him I'm gonna do architecture for 3 years, get my degree, but then I have free reign as to what I want to do with my career. He agreed, but I think in his head he thought I was gonna grow out of the cartoons, or there's a term in SA called I'm a Popeye, and we screened a lot of Popeye as kids in SA. So like whenever you do cartoons or anything like that, people say I'm a Popeye. So they're like, stop with that, I'm a Popeye. But I was like, okay, I would like to do that once I finish architecture. I graduated, got into comic books, and then I remember at the time our industry it's still quite small, but it was even smaller then. And the only comic books you could work for are like football or soccer comic books. There was this one brand called Super Striker. It was sponsored by a petrol company, and it's very much just your newspaper type of comic strip. But I was drawing for a living. I did, however, start getting frustrated with having to only work on that type of thing, because I grew up watching like FLCL, Evangelion, and so I would go home after work on my own stuff, and I just started building a repertoire for that. On the side, I also am a martial artist. My dad is a karate guy, and I used to train quite a bit. That was a big part of my life. I got quite a big injury on my shoulder, and once that happened, a lot of that energy from martial arts I really put into my animation. And I think that's kind of what really helped me skyrocket my work and get it noticed by a bigger audience. So yeah, fast forward a couple of years later, I am basically pushing quite a lot of work in the anime industry, both in Korea and Japan. I've done work for MAPPA Studios. I worked on Attack on Titan, and Shinichiro Watanabe has a new show called Lazarus that I've been doing quite a lot of work on, which has been amazing. And I've also done quite a few projects for Studio Mir that are going to be coming out next year. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey, but thanks everyone for coming. Yeah.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Hey, I'm Daniel Clarke. Also come from Cape Town, like Malcolm. Thank you guys for coming this early. My journey is a bit different. I was lucky enough to have two artists' parents that they actually met at art school. So art was always encouraged. And I always drew pictures. I could always find me with my sketchbook my mother has drawings from when I was like 3.5 or something. So,
these are Daniel's, by the way, just while he's talking.
I didn't do those when I was 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember when I was a kid, everybody was saying, you'll be an artist. And I kind of resented it. I was like, I'll be whatever I want to be. But I mean, I'm like, yeah, I'll be an artist. I can't do anything else. I didn't actually study art. There was one school for arts in Cape Town. I'm sure Malcolm knows. But it's very conceptual art. It's to sort of stick something on a wall and write a dissertation about it, which wasn't what I was interested in. I was interested in the figure and landscapes and sort of narrative storytelling. So at first I tried to be a fine artist. I was doing oil paintings, hanging in galleries. But that world, I found it very exclusive and difficult to break into, and I guess pretentious. I don't want to cast too much shade, but I guess it just wasn't.
Please, we're here for it.
And then so I was looking for work. I needed a job, and I remember I found a Cape Town-based animation studio called Triggerfish Animation, and it was like where the address was, and it was literally 2 streets down from my house on a farm. So I thought, shit, I should try it out. I'd also just fallen off a roof and broken my elbow and jaw. So I had my arm in a sling and my jaw wide shut. My first interview, which was so it was interesting. Like, but clearly the art spoke for itself, I guess. And that sort of started a relationship with that studio that's been on and off for quite a long time. I production designed their second feature. It was called Kumba. I think I was only 23 at the time, so they probably shouldn't have let me, but I did. And then after that, I think it was actually a talk that Malcolm gave at one of our local animation festivals. He was talking about how he had become successful on social media, and I kind of just took notes and did exactly what he did, and it worked. And it really was that way that I could start to get international clients, like to attract attention from the rest of the world. Which has allowed me to do all sorts of interesting jobs. I've worked with the usuals, Netflix, etc. So I work in animation, a little bit live action. I do a lot of illustration. I get kind of bored, so I like to try different styles. I've always wanted to direct. I created a graphic novel called Kariba because I wasn't happy with the sort of storytelling that was going on in the local animation industry. It was very much just copying the American model. The sort of had to be funny, had to have talking animals, that sort of thing, which I think neither of us were interested in. I mean, it has place. It's some great films, but it's just not our.
We'll get into that,
Yeah.
for sure.
There's an irony that I'm about to talk about a talking animal film I just made. But, so yeah, I made a graphic novel called Kariba, which is set in the 50s. With, historically based, but sort of with African fantasy overtones. It's a big dam that was built in Zambia, Zimbabwe, and about the tribes people, 50,000 tribes people who have to move out to accommodate the resulting dam. And I guess the most recent thing I did was finally get to direct something, which was one of the Star Wars Visions films. I don't know if you know that anthology. A friend of mine, Nadia Darius, and I co-directed it. And it's like a 15 minutes short film. And it was great. It was really, I finally got to, when you want to direct, you always think, I'll do it this way, I'll do it this way. You're working for other directors, and you're like, I wouldn't do it that way. And now it is actually all on you. All the mistakes are yours, but so all the victories. Yeah, I guess that's probably good enough for me.
Thank you very much, sir. Jeryce.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so I'm Jeryce Dianingana. So both of my parents are Congolese, Republic of Congo, Brazzaville. I have to say Brazzaville because there's 2 Congos, if you don't know. There is Congo Brazzaville and Congo Kinshasa. And my family immigrated in France. So I grew up in Paris. And I have basically grew up where the art we made, you know about French and you know the relationship. And I always saw our art kind of boxed into one, category. And basically growing up with my culture being content that way, I tried to prove that African can do something that can be exposed beautifully in a home and not in a museum, basically. And basically it was coming from a place where I wanted to teach people about the art culture, that is not like, oh yeah, all that thing belongs in a museum. Yeah, no, it can be just art by itself. So I'm more in the video game industry. So I worked in places like Ubisoft, Eidos Montreal, Rocksteady, and now I'm in Cliffhanger games. So now I can happily say that I'm working on Black Panther, the video game. Thank you. So that's all I wanted to do. So as a kid, like growing up in that industry where Black and African people are not really represented well in video games, working on a game like that is it's a dream come true. So I'm mostly specialized in traditional African art. I'm trying to learn about there is a lot of things in Africa, but I'm trying my best to have a broad knowledge about different ethnic groups, country, language, music, food, dances, and that I can represent in my art and in everything that I will do in the future as well, like in the game as well. So yeah, that's me.
While we're on the subject, I want to start with you, Jeryce, and we're looking at this. This is his work. So these beautiful African masks and the hotel that what is it? Wakongo Hotel, which you guys will see. One of the things that you'll see in his work is a lot of masks. So I want you to explain the significance of that and how it's different from like a westernized point of view and all of that. So please explain.
Yeah. So the mask was my entry point to African art. That's the thing that I love the most, I would say, in my part of Africa, Central Africa. And basically, mask for us is a part of us. It's like part of our soul. It's our identity. Like each mask in our place represents different ethnic groups, and we put our features into those masks. So just by watching a mask, you can say, oh yeah, this coming from these people that represent this. I can even see some similar feature from my face on this mask and and things like that. So even like a fun fact, if you didn't know, there is also some mask called passport mask. So this like tiny mask that you could wear on your belt and that could basically use as passport. Like, oh, just by seeing that, when you're traveling, oh, you're coming from this place, you're coming from this place, you're coming from this specific group.
That's so cool.
We're really putting our soul into those masks. So when I see some mask in museum, and I feel like I'm watching like some ancestor being like between jail or whatever. So I prefer them to be like, out.
I really like that because one of the things that happens here is you guys will notice, especially in this hotel, these are some of my favorite pieces of his, and it takes African art and elevates it to a place that we're used to seeing othered, right? So it's like if you go to a hotel, you're used to seeing like marble statues and all these things that are like from a European point of view. He kind of flipped that, and you see the totems of the mask on the hotel and stuff like that because it's very important, right? But it's also telling you the markers of who those people are. And it's kind of expressing the culture in a way that I think we don't get to see often. And these things could exist, right? Especially if we kind of like start normalizing them. So I appreciate you for that because that's one of those things that I think up until this point before he had done this, that visual was kind of lacking. That visual, and it's still kind of lacking. It's just kind of aggrandizing the culture in a way that elevates it and shows that it's just as beautiful and just as grand, right? The grand premise of it is a lot bigger than what we're used to seeing, especially here. Can you guys talk about just in general, I want you to talk about like industry there in Africa, like how's concept art in Africa?
When myself and Dan are obviously from the same industry, and I think it's growing quite rapidly now. And I have to say, like when COVID happened, it really helped a lot of sort of studios from this side really pay attention to us. Black Panther also is another big milestone for the African art and animation industry. I think one of the challenges we are having is kind of, do we almost completely sell out to what the US market needs?
No.
And should we?
No.
And should we be building our own market and being self-sustaining in that way? And I really I struggle with that because I think if you go too far the one side, which is being too self-sustaining, there are these big powers that exist already in the US that can really elevate things to a certain level that you might not just be able to do it in another context. So it's a bit of like taking the apple from the devil. I don't know if that's a term, but I made it up.
Bars.
And building yourself up in order to grow your own industry. So that's kind of my perspective on how things are going. But yeah, we're a thriving industry. I think one of the big things I'm very proud of about the artists in SA is we're very hungry, and we really wanted to make a stamp on the world. I've worked with a couple of artists from Europe and the US, and I always play the comparison game. And I think there's something nice about what you guys have, where there's a clean, people have very zigzaggy journeys in their career, but there's more or less a destination you can go to. In SA, that destination is a bit more vague. So if you get into art, it's a big sacrifice. So a lot of the people that do get into art, they're getting into it for survival. And I think that creates quite a strong energy from us.
Yeah. When I was coming up, there wasn't really an industry at all. And I'm not that old, so I promise. So the industry really, in Malcolm and my time has sort of developed. Like there were no schools. There was an animation school, but it didn't teach visual development or anything like that. So you kind of had to be a little nuts to spend that much time. You know, I spent like
Setting
2
yourself
years
into it.
in my bedroom practicing drawing, and everyone was like, "What are you doing?" It'll happen. So yeah, it's not a clear path. So it kind of you have to have a sort of an entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. And to Malcolm's points about creating art for our own people or ourselves, it's really difficult because there's no market. Like nobody watches. If you made a film, you could not make your money back in South Africa or Africa.
Yeah.
You have to sell it in the US. So you have to walk that line of like, we want to be authentic. We want to make things that we love, that come from our experiences, but we also have to have Americans accept it. It's a balance. There's no right answer to that, but yeah, we're figuring it out.
Very good.
So me in the video game industry, I work right now in the AAA industry, and the AAA industry is not really in Africa. There is a lot of indie games in West Africa, in Nigeria, Ghana, even in South Africa. But AAA-wise, sadly, there is no big company. There's no Ubisoft or whatever other chain in Africa. I mean, I would have moved right away if it was the case. So the way for me to make a big impact and to show, our beautiful culture to the broad audience was to make my way to those big AAA studios. So I quite moved a lot. So I was born, so I was Paris, I moved Quebec, Montreal, London, and now I just moved to Vancouver. And that's now where am I to this beautiful studio to make this game. And thankfully, there is a lot of 3D artist people in I would say in Congo as well, who's trying to do their best to make a stamp into the country, and having to the chance to reach some AAA studios. So a lot of them made their way to some AAA studio, but they all abroad, so they have to move away from the country and things like that. But this industry is quite young, I would say. So even right now, when I tell my parents or grandparents, I'm making 3D, I'm making video games. Video what? So your parents moved all the way for you to play games. But granddad, yeah, you will see. You will see. But yeah, no, now we understand a bit when I'm sending him some, Congolese mask. I mean, it's still like, is it real or is it a picture? Now I will explain you later. And then, but the video game industry is pretty young, and but it's starting to really rise up, and I'm really happy to see that. So I can see, like, in the future, like years or whatever, like even hopefully one day a AAA studio in Africa would be lovely.
I laugh when they talk about their foreign parents or their African parents. So my business partner, Mike Iwandi, is Nigerian, right? And it's same story, sounds just like all of you guys. And he talks about the fact that his dad wanted him to like basically be a doctor and draw bones. Basically, just didn't want him to draw. He was like, draw anything in the medical field. I want you to be a doctor. And he finally got to a point where he did his art. He pursued it. And his dad still gave him a hard time until he went and saw his name like in the credits, in the credits. But he wasn't excited because it was him. He was just like, our name is in the credits, so still was just like, you should have been a doctor still, even though he's super successful. One of the things you guys are talking about that I want to touch on so that you guys know the impact that their art has specifically is how hungry they are, but how hard they work. Between the three of them, they're each kind of setting tones and trends that you guys are seeing across the board, and they managed to do it from all the way over there here, right? And I think that that's a testament to how hard they work. And then how much they love it. But also when you were talking about industry and you were talking about that double-edged sword, I think that is true because you kind of have to go in one side and then come out the other side. It's like it's a hard balance to figure out when to jump in and jump out. Creatively, what I would hope is that you guys are able to express your true, genuine self, because that's the thing that's going to be the thing that is different here, right? I remember I worked on Black Panther 1 and 2. And I remember when the first one came out, how it kind of changed things, right? But it was still one of those things for my African friends. They were just like, this is great. But they also wanted to tell their actual, true, genuine story, because Black Panther ended up kind of being like Africa's greatest hits. It's like a bunch of stuff all mixed together, right? But then now there's different cultural things. So I've learned a lot, even from Jeryce, talking about masks and talking about the culture, or talking about beading, or talking about the things that they watched when they were growing up, right? Can you guys speak to the authenticity of kind of keeping a project or starting a project? I'll start with you, Malcolm. I'm going to go back to we're looking at some of Malcolm's work right now for one of his own personal projects called Kung Fu is Dead.
So with my project, it's actually quite a curious one because it mixes a lot of Asian culture and African culture. And I've always thought about what authenticity means, especially for an African or South African. You have someone like Dan, who's of European descent, but he's still just as African as he might
Surprise!
be more African than, he might be more African than Phil, So it's I think for me, authenticity runs deeper than just your sort of the color of your skin. I think it's the influences you grow up with, which comes externally too. It's internalizing that, taking what you've grown up with and kind of putting that all together and making something new. I feel like that's true authenticity. I don't want to pretend I don't have influences. I want to lean into them, but I also want to bring work that is new and fresh from my perspective. I think there's a lot of value in that. So that's kind of how I see it.
So just really quick, then we'll move on to this particular sequence is one of my favorite from Malcolm in terms of he also grew up doing tricking, right? So he tricks, so he can actually do these things, and he's kind of referencing himself for moves that he's doing, right? But it's cool to watch an artist, like a lot of us will have influencer. You can tell someone that's really good at anatomy, and they're usually pretty because they build up their anatomy. I think with stuff like this, it's the same thing. There's a lot of love in his projects, but one thing you need to know about him specifically is how hard he works, meaning that he's designing these characters, drawing them, painting them, and animating them. So this is all, when you look at this sequence, this is just him by himself. The backgrounds.
Daniel helped with the backgrounds.
Okay, there we go. See, I didn't know that. My bad. Together, they are incredible. But a lot of the times I'm just always surprised by how much hard work this is, and where you can see everything kind of coming together. Just in terms of character design, right? And in this project, they shapeshift, yes?
Yeah, so I think at the time I was very into, there's a game called Bloody Raw, and it's we kind of transform into beasts, and I always thought it would be really cool to have these Thundercat type of warriors. Actually, Thundercats is a big one too, because I used to watch the Thundercats intro. amazing intro, but the actual show was, okay.
So I will tell you, all of the Marvel Viz Dev artists, especially when we were working remote, is that we would literally start to, in the morning when we would be like dead, right? Everybody be tired or whatever. But like, all right, everybody get up and stretch. And then we would play the opening to Thundercats to wake up.
It's a hype intro. But I think like a lot of cartoons from that time, you have this image of what the show should be, and it's all in the intro. And the actual show is kind of like just trying to sell toys. But a lot of that feeling of what I wanted from Thundercats, a lot of things that I wanted from Street Fighter, I kind of just really threw into this project. Yeah.
So very beautiful. Then go ahead, Jeryce.
Okay. For me, my inspiration, like being authentic, is like Malcolm said, it's like the things you grew up with and trying to translate that into your art. And for me, between, going a lot into Congo and coming back to France, having that shock of, at school studying art and seeing all those European things and studies those European things like very refined and magnifique and stuff. And I'm seeing like, Congo is, beautiful too. So when I started to make 3D, I was just, walking sometime in those streets in, Europe and seeing those big statues in Europe and stuff like that. I was like, this thing could be African as well. Like we could do the same thing and it could be as beautiful as those European things. So when I make like Wakongo Hotel and Wakongo City and all those big cities with like big statues, it was just like a statement of we can do that too. Like our art can be refined and beautiful too, exposed like in buildings, in those places. And I never like studying history and I was very bad at history in France. I was very bad at it because I mean, look, I don't relate with Napoleon, right? Like, I was like, that's not really my history, and I was like, I don't like that. So I was just in history class, I was just studying more and more African things. So I was like, no, I'm gonna do my history class. Like I'm gonna put that away, and my art is a statement of like that growing up where like Africa was in a, like they don't see that as art and whatever. So every time I'm in my art, I'm trying as well to include a lot of things that I grew up with. Like, for example, I'm going to make a city, I'm going to make some plantain shop or, like trying to include what I grew up eating with or the music. I'm trying to play some music in my stuff, in my videos, like Congolese music and like trying to do more than just, visual, but including, food and art and music and all the things that comes with that cultural space.
Is there any, have you worked on any games where you've put in little Easter eggs for yourself?
I mean, under DNA, I can't really say
Yeah.
stuff, but
That's a yes.
But maybe I put some plantain shop somewhere, like in some games, So yeah, when I work, like obviously the games I worked on were not really African related, like Assassin's Creed and Guardian of the Galaxy and things like that. But I find my way.
So if you're playing a video game and you see a plantain shop,
with the Congolese flag somewhere. Guardian of the Galaxy, Congo, what?
I want you guys to talk about, now that we're talking about IP, talk about some of the projects that you guys have been able to work on, just like the original IPs or development of those, if you want, or like tell me like some of the ones you want to talk about.
Okay, our film project.
Yeah.
Like I said, the most recent thing I did was I guess it's not exactly mine, but the Star Wars Visions film, which was a really amazing experience because Lucasfilm basically gave us carte blanche. Mm-hmm. They didn't want us to do anything. It was whatever you want to do it, and they lived up to their word. So we didn't want to. My co-director and I, she is from a group in South Africa who identifies as colored. That's what they call it themselves. So we didn't want to sort of try add an African veneer onto the film. Mm-hmm. The triangles and stuff. It didn't feel authentic to us. So we just, whatever our experiences of living in Africa, we just wanted that to come through. A lot of it's in the environments. The whole world is based very much on the mountain around which we live, Table Mountain. All the plants, the fauna and flora, that's all from Cape Town in South Africa. The relationship between the father and the daughter is very African, it's traditional. She's always respectful, even when she disagrees. There's no petulance, there's no, which is often an American, I don't want to do it.
I'm gonna start using that word too when I see kids out just misbehaving like you petulant child.
That precociousness, we don't really relate to it. So she finds her own way while still respecting her father to do what she needs to do to follow her calling.
Let's actually watch this sequence with sound. I'm gonna play it for the audience.
Yeah, sure.
And actually, I think you painted a bunch of the matte backgrounds.
I did all the mats, yeah.
So there's the background.
Yeah, and you can see that the characters were very much inspired by Indabele dolls, which is a local type of doll made from cloth and beads and these sort of bold color blocking shapes and stuff, which seemed like an obvious, thing to draw from because it's something we know, it's around us. And it also gives the whole idea was to have this tactile, toy-like, nostalgic feel to the film, like something familiar. The character's made from felt, it's something we all know what that feels like, and it's warm and inviting. The other project I worked on was a graphic novel called Kariba, which my mother's from Zimbabwe, and my grandfather actually is an architect, and he worked on some of the surrounding buildings on the dam. So we heard the stories on Nyami Nyami, which is the river god who lives in the Zambezi. He sort of, when he swims down, the crops grow, the fish are plentiful, and what would happen if this dam blocked his passage to the sea, and the idea that he has this daughter who's born and is the new incarnation of Nyami Nyami for the age of man. And it was really interesting. We went to Zimbabwe, we spoke to people, everybody was super encouraging. They're just so super happy that somebody is paying attention to them, that they don't have any of the politics or any of that stuff in their heads. They just were very encouraging, very excited to see it.
One of the things that I want to draw attention to you, it's like preaching to the choir because we're all here for art, right? So we at least understand this industry. But for those of us that are if you're new or if you're just coming into the industry, I want you to pay attention to how much detail and how much goes into creating something before you actually get the finished products, right? So when you see that sequence that we just watched, right? But you see all the matte paintings and all the different design things and then all of the different influences, right? Like even just thinking about being able to translate something that you grew up with, like the dolls, right? And translating that into a character, when it comes here, it feels more authentic because it's something that we're not privy to or it's something that we don't see. So there's a lot of different design elements just in terms of cultural elements that if they're not westernized are better because then it's something that we haven't seen before, right? Or at least, and those are for free, meaning that there's a lot of stuff, especially as a concept artist, we look at a lot of reference, right? So we're looking at stuff all day long, translating things, turning them into something else. But with culture, especially because we're used to seeing the same things, what's cool about culture that I find is that there's so many things that I call just for free, meaning you can literally just show that thing exactly the way that it is, but on the world stage, it'll feel different because people aren't exposed to it, right? So that's kind of an interesting kind of balance and kind of cross-cultural kind of thing. It's this integrating part where it's if we could just show something I have my Filipino friends and they have a thing called tinikling where they clack sticks and they're dancing in between, right? And I was like, why don't they have some kind of Filipino episodic game? And one of the mini games is literally tinikling, literally exactly how it is, right? And it's oh, that's a good idea. And it's but somebody still needs to put it out, do it, and have it be to where it's put in the masses. And one of the things we talked about in my panel yesterday was the fact that those things that are special and can actually make it through oftentimes get shut down because they're just like, well, we don't know if it appeals to a broad enough audience, or we don't know. And what that really is saying is that they don't know if it'll appeal to people outside of, melanated people. So that's kind of like, that's the only way I can say it. They'll say like, it gets very specific, and that's a hard thing, because then what you're really doing is cutting off that cultural thing, and you're also cutting off people's ability to learn about something else, right? Or to just put it out. I use this example often, but one of the things that I think where we are in art, and I want you guys to kind of expand on this, or at least your thought process on it, is putting out art and not necessarily explaining it, but having it have a direct cultural point of view so that people have to pick it up, right? So the example I use is when Beyonce did Homecoming. She just put it out. She did it. It was all based on HBCU culture and the music and the dance and the way they're moving and everything else, right? It was exciting. It was fun. Everybody liked it. But she didn't explain it. She didn't go back and say, well, the reason we're doing this here is, and the reason this remix sounds like this is. And what happens is it expanded that block to where people were more interested in that thing because they had to learn, right? Can you guys talk about how you feel like that translates with like African culture, westernized, or like however that works?
Yeah. So like I told you guys, one of my favorite things is mask, and I usually see mask being represented as just African mask. Like just African mask as the name, and each mask, each one of them got a name and a meaning. And usually they don't give credits enough. For example, this one, which is, I was inspired by the Yakuba culture in Ivory Coast. It's a country that I'm very close to. That Yakuba bust, basically the Yakuba people make those masks, and it's just to represent the beauty of a Yakuba woman. And I remember I saw that specific mask one day in a museum in France, and it was just called African mask. And I was like, it's stripped out of everything, like the meaning of like, oh, those features, it's like those specific features. I mean, like my mom used, the mouth a bit going down, like it feels like she's looking at you like, the audacity of you. But, right, our beauty stands, I mean, in Ivory Coast, I mean, if you go, you will see. But yeah, those features are really, from, Ivory Coast, and specifically from those Yakuba people. And I love those masks. It's just the beauty of our people. And I like when you give credits, like you said, both of you said. I like when you gave credits, when you give exactly the name of the ethnic group, of the meaning as well of and that for the people to understand why it's been made and the name. Like if you want to do some research and know more about it, you have a point of research, So giving credits is one of the most important things for me. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think everything we're discussing here is important, imparting sort of the specificity of our culture. But I think we're also in the entertainment industry. And it's one of those things where I always think about skating that line of, are you educating or are you entertaining? And I think for me, what I settled on is make something very entertaining and put everything that you want to educate people in there, but it has to be entertaining first, I think, and then people sort of get drawn in and want to educate themselves about what you've put in this thing. And I think you've seen it in different films, like the whole world consumes American television. So you know what McDonald's is, Five Guys Burgers and Fries, all that stuff. Not that's what your culture boils down to. But, I think there's really
Go on.
Please, we're not in our place. Like
there's definitely an effort to make things very entertaining, and that's what draws people in to be interested in what it is you have to offer.
Let's see here. I want to go back to, or at least let's start a different topic. I want you guys to see Kizazi Moto. I want to talk about that for a little bit. So let's watch let me see, is the trailer coming up? Okay, hold on. I'll show you guys some sequences. Actually, I'll show you the trailer first.
Open your eyes. It is not what we have, but what we do.
Let's go. We are headed to the big leagues, Jaya Army.
From the ruins of great Zimbabwe!
You are a disgrace to your name, kiddo.
I should be out there making them pay!
Move?
You will not have him again!
You chose this fate.
You think that's fast? Watch this.
All right, let's play. Ready to meet your ancestors?
So, all three of you guys worked on this, yes? There's an anthology series, so you guys, if you haven't seen it, you should. But it's definitely like almost like in the same thing, like Star Wars Visions, Love, Death, and Robots. It's like where there's different stories, right, to tell. What was fun about this one, it was all from different points of view from African artists, right? So let's talk about this one for a little bit. Malcolm, talk about this one.
Sure, yeah. I think this also connects to the IP conversation we were having earlier, but I think it's quite interesting to know how everyone actually got involved with this project. At the time, the studio Triggerfish in Cape Town, they had a deal with Netflix. They were producing a show called Mama K's Team 4. And through that, they had made connections with some of the execs there and in Disney, at Disney+. I went with them to pitch the original idea, and I think, again, Black Panther was such a big milestone, and people were quite hungry to kind of use that energy. So we pitched this kind of like Afro futurist anthology, and Triggerfish went home, made a list of a whole bunch of directors and artists they want to work with, and sent out emails, and we had to pitch. And I think there were about 70 people that were approached. Everyone pitched. It got whittled down to 10, I think. Yeah, 10 films. So with my main pitch was kind of what I've been talking about, where I wanted my influences to be worn on my sleeve. I wanted something that felt like the things I grew up with, but I also wanted to be quite authentic to my culture and my heritage. So we came up with Mkuzi, the Spirit Racer, and this was a co-direction with my ally Panda, who couldn't be here. But it's about a Zulu kid that is growing up in Soweto, and it's kind of in the future, and a whole bunch of aliens have landed in SA, and it's just like some parallels to colonization, and he has to race for his neighborhood. We wanted quite a simple plot that you can just get into, take some stuff out and get out. So he's racing for his neighborhood. He's trying to save his people from this alien overlord called Ogun, and we just really wanted to like express sort of the fun and energy that we know African animation can have. Another interesting thing about a lot of the designs for the show is like Jeryce was talking about masks. We wanted to kind of design aliens that felt African in a way. So our starting point was African masks, and we took different cultures and we extrapolated alien designs from them. And so Ogun is a Nigerian god of metalwork and war, and we took some masks that represented him, and then we kind of extrapolated from that. So we thought that was just like a really cool way to meld some of our heritage and bring that into a new space.
One of the things that I want you to draw you guys' attention to when you watch these shorts is when he's talking about the authenticity of the shape language and the stuff that they're using. It just inherently feels different when people leave it alone, meaning that instead of them trying to change it into something else, I like that they were able to take their influences and then get them to screen, because even in the way that this was animated and the shapes that are used, it kind of feels like its own thing. And I feel like that's like Africa does have, especially the artists there, and you can see it from their styles, they're creating their own industry right now. Like you're seeing it, like, so you know how you have like anime and all those other things, right? There's influences, but they don't have to all be drawn the same way. And I think that what's great about it is that these things are starting to create a style that you could kind of say is like, it's their own, I think. And I think that that's a really good thing. So it's like just getting the masses to see that more would be great. And then also what Jeryce was talking about in terms of like aesthetics of beauty, right? They're different places. Like if you talk to someone that's Nigerian, a gap in the teeth is really beautiful, right? There's different aesthetics as well. And it's some of those things where it's just like you have to kind of pinpoint them all. One of the things that I learned from these guys, and then also just from working on Black Panther and all of that stuff and kind of trying to do research, is how frustrating it gets when you want to be specific, right? So when I was like, when he's saying like it's so disrespectful to just see something and it's like African mask, it's like it's not detailed enough, right? So I would go and I would look like I would be working on something specific and I'd be like, I need Zimbabwean sculpture. But what I would get, even when I searched in Google, is everything. So it's like, then I'm confused because I'm like, it's so hard to learn. There's so many different things. There's different dialects. There's all this stuff. So it's overwhelming, but it is fun to get in the weeds and actually learn, because then you can see how much culture is there, how much language is there, and try to see if you can be as specific and learn little bits of it while being respectful to the culture. Let me see. I'm going to pull up some of Jeryce's work from that. Which one? What was your short called?
So this one was the episode 3 called Moremi. So Moremi is a Yoruba story. It's a Nigerian story. So I worked with the great director Shof Coker and the artist Harrison Yinyafoe. So we both tried to make, basically we studied Yoruba architecture. There's a lot of Yoruba architecture in Nigeria, and we basically only try to get inspiration from that, only from that. So for example, that temple, it's heavily Yoruba inspired. And for the story, it's a Yoruba story. So I'm not gonna, if you want to watch, I'm not gonna tell what the story is, because you need to see it by yourself. But it's very beautiful, the aesthetic, like even the mask and all the shape, the aesthetic of the characters and everything is really inspired from the Yoruba culture. And yeah, you need to see it, guys. It's really, really beautiful.
And Daniel?
I wasn't actually.
Okay,
I was making the.
Making the Star Wars one. Okay. So then let me go back to, I think there was one other thing that I wanted to kind of highlight with you guys. Jeryce, talk about this really quickly. What are these?
Oh, yeah. So this is called Kani. So Kani is basically, I was inspired by our Chokwe mask in Congo. And the Chokwe mask, some of them are, like the Yakuba, are made to basically pay tribute to our moms and grandmoms, like the women in the society, in the Chokwe society. And basically, I started this because I never saw any Afro fantasies, stylized kind of art with the Congolese culture. And basically, I took that Chokwe mask and made it in a way that, basically, that's a god. That's basically a goddess that's taking care of the universe. Kani in Congo means peace and hope. And I mean, I have a little cousin named that way as well. so yeah, Chokwe mask that represents the positive in the society, and the positive in the society it's woman in Chokwe. And I translated that in that world where the Chokwe god would basically take care of the universe.
I wanted to talk to Daniel. If you look back at Daniel's work here, I want you to talk, Daniel, a little bit about how fashion influences your work. Like here.
Yeah, it's interesting because people think I've actually got I worked on that Kid Cudi show. What's it called again? Super Galactic. Intergalactic.
Yeah,
I should know.
I was just like, which one?
I was hired because of these pieces. I wasn't actually interested in fashion. I just like shapes and colors and poses.
That's crazy.
And almost like painting it like an abstract. Just what's the rhythm of the shapes and the movement, and then just a clean background so it stands out, and that is the subject. But I definitely got into fashion, street fashion and stuff afterwards, getting a new appreciation for it.
The appreciation that we have a lot of, like for us, like I work a lot in costume, was just like the dynamic of the shape, his stylization, but then also how he's able to make the clothes fit the way that they fit. Like, because a lot of the times people are drawing, it's not enough to just draw something that has to fit properly. So I think that they're really dynamic and cool. Oftentimes too, if you guys are on Pinterest, you'll probably run around these things all the time and you're just not sure who they were. So they're him. Including these, I see these often.
This is Dumbbell Boxing. It's mainly from Nigeria, I think. It's just, I thought this would be awesome I mean, there's martial arts from all around the world, but I don't think we really see much actual African martial arts, and it is intense to watch.
Yeah, really
These guys
intense.
are crazy. I mean, they just bandage up their hand and then just beat the shit out of each other.
there is videos on YouTube. Go search videos on YouTube of that.
Please go and check it out.
So once again, the shapes and the dynamism, and and also just painting those sorts of skin tones. I think you don't see people paint those sort of skin tones much. They're so interesting, different from painting white skin tones. All the blues and shadows and stuff you get just from an artist perspective. It's just interesting. It's fascinating.
I also appreciate you knowing those too, because a lot of the times here as American artists, we have to explain that, or we have to say like, or it's like there'll be like lifeless, or it's like, hey, you should add in more stuff, so it's a little bit harder to get more color, more reflection of light. I think it's something that once you study it, it comes through in your artwork.